James C. McCroskey is a professor in the Department of Communication Studies at the University of Alabama at Birmingham. From 1972 to 1997, he served as chair of the Department of Communication Studies at West Virginia University. Prior to joining the faculty at the University of Alabama at Birmingham in 2006, he held positions at Illinois State University, Michigan State University, Pennsylvania State University, Old Dominion University, and the University of Hawaii. He also taught high school speech and coach debate in Scotland and Watertown, South Dakota. Dr. McCroskey's research and teaching interests have varied over his career, but he is most known for his work in credibility, communication apprehension, instructional communication, and most recently, communibiology. His devotion to programmatic research and the social scientific approach to scholarship has been evident in all of his research programs. Dr. McCroskey is the most published scholar in the field of human communication to date. His first book, An Introduction to Rhetorical Communication, originally published in 1968 and now in its 9th edition, is now one of the oldest continuously published books in the field. Dr. McCroskey has received the Robert J. Kibler Memorial Award from the National Communication Association and Distinguished Service Awards from the Eastern Communication Association and the World Communication Association. He has edited Human Communication Research, Communication Education, and Communication Research Reports. Dr. McCroskey is consistently ranked as the most prolific scholar in communication studies, with well over 200 peer-reviewed articles and published more than 80-plus textbooks. Please welcome Dr. James C. McCroskey. In the mid-1990s, you and Michael Beatty became interested in how biology influences communication, which you dubbed communibiology. What originally led to this interest?
Well, this was essentially a combination of our concerns with communication apprehension and instructional communication. We sat together and said, what the heck's wrong? And we decided that probably there was something biological that was involved. About that time, a large amount of research was published in the field of psychology, in an area that they named, instead of communibiology, it was psychobiology. It was very prominent in the psych field, and we decided we'd get caught up with that, and we got into it. And we figured that this was really very, very appropriate to look at in terms of communication. That people in the psychology of psychobiology were saying things. I don't have the direct specific statement, but they were talking about the only way that you could identify temperament, which is the big thing in psychobiology, is through the way people communicate. And it just, jumped right into us and said, in other words, all of this stuff about the way humans function, like in communication, and these temperament variables, all of these things are genetic, and at least in part. And so we decided that we needed to do some research and begin preaching to the field. That maybe this is what we've been missing all these years.
Now, what are the basic underlying principles of communibiology?
Well, I'm not sure there are any. There's in the paradigm, it's still in its early stages. But essentially, what we're saying in it is that that communication and psychology work together, and the foundations of one are very much the foundations of the other.
Now, have you had much backlash from other communication scholars about this idea?
Oh, yes. We've been called Nazis and all of that kind of thing. People, not only in communication, but in a lot of other disciplines, and during and after the World War II, just thought that any genetic work had to be done by the Nazis and everything was evil. And of course, that was true at the time, but it certainly was not true today. And there's a lot of the Russians got into this quite a while before in the United States because of that bias against studying genetics. Europe and as a whole got way ahead of us, but we're in the process now of doing biological research that doesn't hurt anyone in order to be able to figure out how humans work.
Now, one of the other critiques that has often been put towards the communibiological paradigm is that people want to go either it's all nature or it's all nurture, and as a result of that, they kind of leave out the middle ground. So, what then is the role of one's culture in the communibiological paradigm?
Well, this is one of those things that Mike Beatty and I did not agree on. And I think I'm right and he's wrong. He thinks that I'm not going to speak for what he thinks now, but in the early days at least, he thought that it was all genetic. And of course, that's been a philosophical argument for centuries. And in reality, of course, neither one of those, in my opinion at least, is totally the predictor of how people function and the way they behave. To ignore culture is just, in my opinion, stupid. Of course, cultures have an impact on the way people behave. And to what degree, we don't know. But when we talk about the learning method, that we learn things, well, the way we learn things is through our culture. And, of course, what our parents teach us and what we observe in other people's behaviors. And I am convinced that both are impacted by both genetics and culture. But no one knows exactly what the percentage, we'll say, of one is compared to the other. We don't think that should be considered a big issue. We think from one context to another, we can have some things very, very culturally determined and others that are genetically determined. With communication apprehension, we estimate that it's 80% can be accounted for by genetics. Now, the other 20%, well, it may be learning through the culture, or it may be just our measures were not as perfect as we'd like to have them. But to think of human behavior not being impacted on by culture is just insane. So yes, I have done a lot of research with a variety of colleagues in various parts of the world, and we find, for example, that in communication apprehension, that it exists everywhere, and some cultures are a little bit more than another. Now, maybe that's genetic, but I don't think so. And most people I've talked with don't think that that's so either. But the big differences are within cultures, not between cultures. In every study that we have done in other cultures, we found the same pattern as in the United States. That is, there's a tremendous number of people that are high apprehensive, and then another group that are not apprehensive. They're compulsive communicators in many cases. And then, of course, there's the grand middle, where they're a little bit apprehensive, but not in most contexts. So culture is there, and it is always going to be there. And yes, it does have an impact.
Now, the original research in communibiology was all survey-based, which has been another one of the limitations that some of the skeptics have readily pointed out. Have there been any medically driven studies that support the findings of these early survey-based studies?
Well, first of all, I would like to ask all of those people that want that kind of research done to get out there and do it. It's easy to say to use these other methods.
But what kinds of other studies are being done? Because I know that
Well, yeah, there are. There's a book that's coming out probably by this fall. It's what we call Communibiology 2. That is not the title of the book, but where we got a number of people from a number of disciplines who have done biological research on communication contexts and situations, including medicine, that will be available very, very shortly. I think it'll open some eyes.
now, is that the follow-up to the Biology of Communication published by yourself and Michael Beatty in
Yes,
2001 by Hampton Press?
yes, yes. Mm-hmm.
And what kinds of issues are you exploring in that new text?
It's kind of hard to explain them because for our field, they're very weird. Finding out by measuring the saliva in a person's mouth can predict an awful lot of what they're going to be saying and doing.
So this new text is actually going to show some of these biological indicators.
That's right.
Now, where do you envision the future of communibiological research taking the field of communication in the next decade?
Well, I'm not at all sure. These kind of guesses that I've made in the past have really been bad. I suspect this will be the case also. I think the footing for this will be the book I just mentioned. There's a lot of directions that can be taken. Also, there's the ongoing research on the human brain. Brain science is very complex, and they are still getting going. Since 1990, they've been working. Before that, they couldn't. Now we have technology where we can find out some things a lot of things that people want to know about the way human brain works. One of those that involves communication is lying. And, is there a way to identify when a person is lying or they're not? Well, preliminary research that Beatty and his group have done suggests that yes, there is a way to do that. You can identify in the brain when a person is lying or they aren't lying. We've never in the history of the human existence have we been able to get a valid measure of lying. It looks like today we're going to have that very, very soon. Now we have the ethical issue of what to do with it.
CommuniCast is a production of the Communication and Media Department